nobody knows what tomorrow brings in the world of financial services overall. So I think having regulatory clarity should be like a given, right? Like that will help us all build better businesses and help everyone be a better investor.
Welcome to the Path to Passive podcast, where we talk about building wealth and empowering lifestyle through commercial real estate investing for tech professionals. I always wish that other tech professionals reaching financial freedom had documented their journey along the way, so I'm doing it for the rest of us. Join us as we explore stories, many failures, and lessons learned along the way. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. Kirill, super excited to have you here. Talking to another techie in the space, someone who is also really interested in real estate, has a career in real estate and in tech. I'm super pumped to have you. And as the host of this podcast, also being in tech and in real estate, I think this is a perfect fit, not only for this conversation. I'm really excited to learn some more about what you've got going, and also for the listeners who love to be on the forefront of technology and real estate as well. So thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself to start, as founder and CEO of NewSilver, your background in tech, and we'll get into it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm excited to talk to your listeners as well, and excited to be talking to another techie and the tech audience as well. So as we were talking just right before we started, my background, I started out as a pure play, tech, whether it's writing code or doing sort of, cloud enablement, server stuff, like whatever, like I was doing everything. I started out, my first business. Let me take a step back, kind of talk about my background in tech. I came to US as a kid. I was in my early teens. My father was and still is a software developer. So we came from what was then USSR and now is Belarus. Right before the breakup, we left in 1989. Wow. So I'm dating myself here, but it's been some time. And so I remember as a kid, like he worked at a university, and he would take me there, and like the tech scene was like non-existent right at that place, like when we left, and I don't know what it is now. I'm sure it's leaps and bounds behind to what we have here, but it's probably better than when we left. But he would take me over there, like I'd play with like perforated cards, if some of the folks in the audience remember what those are, right? Like the cards with the holes in them, and like he would like have to program mainframes, and we'd have like I remember carrying around these huge magnetic tapes, IBM mainframe tapes and all that. So that was fun. But that really like gave me, and I also played video games. There were some video games on like a green screen that like I don't know, like moving like a thingy and like shooting, whatever. Like that was awesome. But that really like lighted a fire in me, I guess, like where I can like, I just loved, I love technology. And like when we moved to the US, sort of the personal computing was at its sort of early days. Internet was just out there. Like I remember like, we built a computer from scratch. I went to like a PC show, bought parts, like put some together, and then I'd call up BBSs and, download games. Like that was really the thing. I remember like, I was just thinking about this recently. So I kind of totally forgot, like just remembered this recently that I'd call up BBSs, and we were trying to like figure out what the cost is going to be, because for somehow we didn't think about what the cost. We were calling up on on a regular phone line, right, with like a 2400, I don't know, maybe 9600 BPS modem or something like that. And we're trying to figure out what it's going to cost us to download this game. And I can't remember what we figured out, probably nothing, but we ended up like calling, like leaving it on all night for nights on end probably. And then we ended up getting like $1,000 bill at my parents' house for the phone, like to call like another country or something. That was crazy. Like, $1,000, in those times when we just kind of, moved here not too long ago. My dad was not very happy, to say the least. But anyway, kind of fast forward, my first business when I was in college, I started up like a web hosting company called US Web Hosting. And I was just really, like built some, basic sort of virtual server configuration, like resold like shared server accounts, and like then
Hmm.
some sort like full on server accounts, and it was fun. It was great. Gave me like kind of exposure to the business world. Um, Ended up selling it for a little bit of money. It was great, great for the time and so forth. So kind of, really my first exposure there. And then from there, I ended up, after school, after college, I had like worked at a couple of jobs, IBM and a couple other places, and then ended up meeting my co-founder for what became an IT services company called ComputerSupport.com. It's now
Hmm.
called Stratus Point IT. We sold the company a few years ago, and yeah, so essentially like just managed services support for cloud. Like we are, I think, one of the earlier AWS partners in our area. Kind of always had that belief in what the cloud's going to do, how it revolutionize things. And I remember, like how like people didn't really think it's going to do much, and I was, and like it's easy to say now, like, hey, I mean, come on, I
Right.
mean, think about it, right? But back then, especially telling like like companies, right, telling businesses like, hey, you don't really need to have hardware in your closet
Hmm.
or in co-location somewhere, right? Like you could just
Yep.
buy it on demand, and that was really so new to people. And I still think to this day, like I'm still helping the company that we originally founded, on the
Hmm.
board as a board member and whatnot. So I'm kind of aware of what's going on. But I think most things are in the cloud, but not everything. So it's been some time, and not everything is there. So yes,
Yep.
I mean now, kind of fast forward through a couple of things. That also we had a software company that kind of spun out of the business that we sold as well. Software is
Hmm.
focused on IT, service delivery, service providers, things like that. And then I kind of, I was always interested in fintech and investing, and we had tried to start up a blockchain company during like the 2017 or so hype years.
Sure.
That didn't work
Hmm.
out, but out of that, we were building some pricing engines, some like pricing analysis stuff, not necessarily on the blockchain, but just as one of the components, and that was working really well. So like we basically took that piece, and that's what we went to market with NewSilver. NewSilver is essentially a fintech originator lender for real estate investors. So we use this pricing engine to help. Our differentiators are fast approval. So you can go online to our website, get approved, and get your term sheet in like under
Cool.
5 minutes. And this
Nice.
pricing engine that we wrote originally is really what the bones of the system is still to this day. So yeah, that's high level.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I especially love, I saw you light up there too, about talking about the things that your dad showed you and, the games, what sort of lit the fire in you to get into tech. I think, and then, how you continue to just learn and do more and more from there. I mean, it's crazy how we can, really compress our life in a timeline that quickly, but I think it really shows the theme of what we're going to get into later on today too, about this is about cutting edge technology, about AI and investing and passive investing and underwriting, etc. You gave some great themes to that. Um, and I did see some of the different companies you were talking about, the managed services one, you talked about the blockchain one as well, but these were all stepping stones, all learning things along the way too, right? And if I could peel back a little bit of that story before we get into some of the other content as well, I think really getting to know our guests and yourself here is important, because one of the things that I'm always curious about is, many people are in tech. You saw the going from on-prem. And by the way, I think the last stat I saw was like only 17% of companies are going into cloud so far. So if you can imagine
Wow.
that. Yeah,
Seriously.
exactly. Yes.
Wow, that's
So
unreal.
yeah, it is unreal. But anyway, it's just, it's nothing, right? It's drop in the bucket. Um, but there's lots of people in tech, but not many people are actually starting their own companies, and not many people are, doing some of the things that you did. And so the first thing that I'm curious about is, how did you get into real estate?
Yeah, so I think I still don't consider myself like a real estate expert by any means, right? I talk to people who are much more, like I know enough to be dangerous, really. But
Hmm.
I got into real estate investing through a friend of mine, he ran like a fund for fix and flip. That's really how I learned about it. This was after like the 2008, real estate
Hmm.
crisis, as it was kind of coming down, right? Like at the sort of the bottom of it. I think
Hmm.
some folks, including him, saw an opportunity to, essentially buy properties much cheaper than what they're probably
Hmm.
worth, and took advantage of that. But that was kind of, I was doing other things at the time, but that's really how I learned about real estate investing and fix and flip. And like, I had no idea about it. But I think, I love real estate because one of the main things, there's a lot of interesting things about it, but one of the main things is just because of so much data that's available on this asset class, right? I like the fact that like transactions are public for the most part, right? I mean, there's certainly all kinds of issues, with the data that's out there, but there is a lot of it, right? So you could do things with that data, and like a lot of other sort of private market transactions, that data may not be available. So that's really what, like, one of the main things I love about real estate. I also like kind of the creativity. There's, I think, far and few like things that in business you could be very creative, and I think real estate is one of them. I mean, you could really, like, if you're building or renovating or whatever, like just doing touch up work, like you could actually
Hmm.
like use your creativity and design things and think about, like, user experience, quote
Yeah.
unquote, like for that house, right? So I love that too.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there just to kind of touch on those. That's really cool. Is you saw the opportunity of real estate, right, with the level of data. So using a lot of the tech brain to look at this as an asset class, and here's what I can do with it, right? And if it's not already apparent to the listener, this is going to be more about an executive level conversation. If you would going to talk to your customer, but here we have Kirill to talk to us about how he's taken the frame of mind of being investor, owner, and a technologist to look at real estate and to have that opportunity to see where can I provide value, just like looking at real estate, adding in your creativity to do something with it. So cool. But following that thread, so that was sort of the opportunity, and so you guys started to work together, put together these companies, and started to move forward. Then what happened next?
At NewSilver or at
Along your journey. So you found real estate as the opportunity. I guess
right?
there was the fix and
Yeah,
flip fund, and then
gotcha.
yeah, how did you move on from there?
Yeah, so like initially I was really like a passive investor in the fund myself, right? Like, so this friend of mine that ran the fund, I basically invested a little bit of money, and I asked him, because he was a friend and he still is a friend. I asked him to see if he like include me on some of the things that
Hmm.
he's doing. Could he like show me how he evaluates the properties? Like, so I just went on some like calls with him. I went on to like look at some actual properties, and like I saw, I mean, obviously, like, again, I'm still not to a level of like someone that can walk in and say like, hey, this is what it's going to cost to rehab this thing, or like these are the
Hmm.
gotchas in this place, right? I'm not to that level, but I do, like, so that gave me the initial exposure, and then it was some number of years, but I always thought, like, sort of kept real estate in the back of my mind. And when we had developed this pricing engine, we weren't really sure. It was for slightly a different use case, but because we saw that it could value real estate using data, we thought that, okay, we had some other ideas for it. Like, we thought, hey, can we just build like a SaaS, and sell the SaaS to
Hmm.
other lenders potentially. For various reasons, we didn't like that. But we're like, hey, why, if we're gonna, I mean, this is like a perfect opportunity. I don't know that it was like necessarily the perfect time for us to start the business, because at the time we obviously didn't know it. But when we started, COVID hit, like, I think less than 6 months into our new company. It was literally the three, myself, my co-founder, and our CTO, was the three of us. And everything that we started with was basically just, we had to toss it out the window. Like, everything just completely stopped. If folks
Gotcha.
remember, what was happening, like the first, you know, was it 2 or 3 months or something like that, right? Like, when people didn't know, I remember it was like March of 2019, I believe, right? Was it 2019 or 20? I
For
think it was,
COVID.
Yeah,
pandemic?
yeah,
2020.
like
Yeah.
yeah, 2020. So like that's when they announced. I remember it was like March or February or something like that. Like
Yep.
you know,
Exactly.
that's when they announced like, hey, I mean, we were hearing about it, like, there's a pandemic in China or something
Yes.
like, like, but
Yep.
honestly, I was kind of like, I don't know. I mean, okay, there's a pandemic somewhere else. I mean, I don't
Right.
know what's going on here, right? Like, and until it really like hit, and then even when it hit, my thinking was always like, hey, how does it affect, real estate? I mean, again, like I never thought it was going to be the Black Plague or something like that, right? Like
Mm.
we're much
Hmm.
obviously in at that time, people didn't even know how the transmission of a virus
Right.
occurred. Like, so we're obviously much smarter now. Not even knowing how quickly vaccines would be developed. In the beginning, we didn't know it's going to take a year or is it going to take a month. I mean, they ended up getting developed very quickly, but we didn't know. But nonetheless, like everything just came to a stop, and we had to throw our playbook out the window, basically. And then we were able to restart, and things kind of took off from there, even more so than before with the market that it was like, right. The real estate, the transactions were just kind of through the roof. People were like, we weren't enough capitalized at the time, I think, to really handle what we could have done. Like if this was, if we were better prepared, and we weren't because we're just a early
Sure.
stage startup, right? And people were like banging down our doors, like getting like just going using our software, just generating proof of funds and term sheets, and then going to other lenders because we couldn't do the loans in some cases. So we just weren't prepared for
Sure.
what we had coming. But yeah, it was an interesting experience.
Cool. So I think that's sort of a perfect jump off point because you're describing like, what happened, but also the problem or the opportunity that was really there, right? Which was that people started to use the software that you guys put together, the doing the underwriting, the calculations, right? Quicker. That's really what that value of that software was, right?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. I
Cool.
mean,
So let's do a little bit of a pivot here, right? We're a little bit in, and I want to make sure we get to the meat of the content, which is we're talking about passive investing using technology in this next in this virtual world, and especially with combining the technology that you and team had put together. So let's sort of break this down for a second and spend a minute on it. When we're talking about passive investing using technology, passive investing, invest our capital to get some kind of return, right? And if we're talking about in real estate, what kind of real estate are we talking about here?
yeah. So I mean, the real estate that NewSilver works with is basically residential real estate. It's mostly 1 through 4 family, sometimes slightly larger than that. The vast majority is 1 through 4 family.
Okay, cool. And so to talk to me a little bit about the business model then. So is this for like renters, for flippers? If I have an investor, who wants to invest their capital into something like this fund, who does New Silver go and lend money to? What do they do with the capital? How do they invest? That they get returns back from the operator, so to speak, so that the
Sure.
investor gets paid. What does that look like?
Yep. Yeah, I can explain the structure a little bit. So, NewSilver runs a fund called NewSilver Income Fund, which is for accredited investors, and basically it's a fund that invests in loans, a pool of loans that NewSilver originates using the technology that I was describing earlier.
Great.
The fund, we've had the fund for maybe a couple of years or so now. Last year, it returned 17% net of fees, so it's got a solid return profile. Essentially, so it's a passive fund, right? It pays quarterly dividends. And the fund, essentially, is just a component of NewSilver's origination volume. So,
Hmm.
and the way that NewSilver uses technology to originate, and again, we essentially look at people that come to us, right? We are not like owners operators. We don't buy property ourselves. We don't do any of that stuff. So we
Hmm.
essentially use marketing or other methods. I mean, we have a lot of repeat borrowers. We have folks that we talk to, that come to us through various channels. And essentially, they're builders or they're people that buy and rent. Though the buy and rent portion is not part of what the fund focuses on. The fund really focuses on ground up construction and fix and flip types of projects, because
Got
those
it.
are short duration, right? Like the buy and hold, like those types of loans, we have a couple of institutional partners for, and those are 30-year, mortgages that
Yep.
look similar to a typical consumer type of a loan. We do those, but that's not our primary focus there. So yes, I mean, somebody who come to us, they have whether or not they have a property in mind already. I mean, they can kind of get a preliminary valuation using our software. We also have a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of different calculators that we built on our website to kind of help
Mm-hmm.
people like figure out what are they going to make, if they invest X amount of dollars, what kind of returns can they get on their project, things like that. So there's probably like I don't know, 10 calculators or so that we've
Yep.
built that people really like using. We also have a product to help folks like essentially search on market properties and try to figure out what the returns would be essentially. But a lot of people come to us with a project in hand already, right? Like they're not necessarily looking for us to give them something, though we can help there too. But they come to
Cool.
us, plug in the address, plug in a couple of data points. Our software does its magic and gives them like, here's the loan amount, here's the interest rate,
Mm-hmm.
here's the other costs and things like that,
Right.
all based on the information that either they put in or we have, our analytics, has and analyzes and kind of puts it all together.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So start to finish then for the listener is, you basically have this debt fund, right? For loans that credit investors would come in and invest into. From your perspective, on the business side, you have people that are looking at 1 through 4s, right? Just under what's considered multifamily to go and do a construction, a fix and flip. And if it's a longer term rental, it will be, you'll basically refer out to one of the institutional partners who will, you'll probably underwrite, and then the loan will get originated out to them, right?
We
Um,
originate the loan actually ourselves, but then we don't hold on to those because it's just we're not built for that. But we would originate the loan ourselves, and then the institutional partner will take over from there.
okay, cool. And then based on whatever those returns are, that's how the fund gets paid, and those get paid back to investors on that quarterly basis.
Correct. Exactly.
Cool. So when we're talking again, there's a focal point here around technology and AI with real estate. So just quickly, since we're talking structure here, where does the AI bit really come into play, and how does that how is that injected into tech?
We don't. So right now we don't use AI for like, I guess, anything customer related, right? The AI, so the technology that we have is more or less like analytics type of tech, right? That does not currently utilize AI, though. We're always thinking of like, how can AI help here? We do where we use AI specifically is as like a co-pilot to help us do our work faster, right? So I think
Nice.
being a tech company, we really like, not only do we have technology that I think can get to approval much quicker than our competitors for for the potential borrowers that come in. The work that we do after approval, there is some manual work, right? We still have to do some
Mm-hmm.
manual and underwriting. We still look at appraisals and other things and various kinds of data. So that's where we use Copilot. Some of it like off the shelf, some stuff that we built ourselves that uses LLMs that aren't ours, but we have some customizations and things to help make our lives a little bit easier. So that's where AI comes in. I think we're very, very efficient in what we do, in the back of the house kind of work,
Yep.
so that at the end of the day, our product is probably more accurate and faster
Yep.
delivered than our competitors.
Yeah, no, that's outstanding, because the more you do that, the more you can build your in-house models as well, and the more traffic you come in, the more you do that process, the more you run it through. I mean, that's just the nature of using things like AI for your own business anyway. So I hear what you're saying, but that's still a component, and it's an important component. Are there I'm throwing this out there because I know you talked about it a couple of times from the blockchain perspective too. Are you using that in company to serve customers faster as well? And if so, how so?
Yeah, so blockchain, it really touches the capital stack. It's not necessarily direct to customer in that case either. But so the blockchain portion, we use a partner. We work with a partner called Centrifuge. That partner is basically a tokenization engine, and through them, we've been able to tap some capital on the blockchain that enables us to essentially lend. So some of this capital is our own that comes in, right? Some of it, we have some senior investors that are blockchain based.
Hmm.
I wouldn't even say companies. They're the one that we work with is a DAO, so they're like a community, a collective of folks that in a decentralized fashion has created their own technology, their own stable coin, things like that. So they're an investor. We've been working with them for about 3 years now. They essentially, they participate in a similar way that our fund investors participate. They provide the capital. So whereas again, this isn't necessarily borrower facing or customer facing, but this helps us originate faster at the end of the day, keep our costs down,
Hmm.
keep things flowing as quickly as possible.
Would you say that that's where the main value add comes from? And I mean, you mentioned three right there, but as I think about these things, customers are always going to want things that are faster, safer, more reliable, cheaper, et cetera. So, um, where from the traditional sense to this sense, where would you say that the biggest improvements are using uh, any set of tech here?
Well, I think if we're talking about AI, it's definitely faster and more accurate, right? And I think again, customers, they obviously expect that everything is always accurate, but could it be delivered as fast as what AI does? I mean, we're using AI for a bunch of different things, like I don't know, like having AI review an appraisal, for example. We're testing that now. So we get an appraisal back,
Mm,
it's done by a person. Unfortunately, we haven't found AI yet that can help us actually do the appraisal.
mm,
Right, like to help, I don't think AI, at least Chat GPT, that like in the trials that we did, like it has some valuation for real estate, but it's not very exact. Perhaps somebody's building this somewhere. I'm sure somebody's thinking about it, but
yep.
we're not using it for that. So we get a traditional appraisal, right? Like a person goes there, they're a licensed appraiser, they take pictures. Sometimes we close without an appraisal, and we could do it post close. No worries there, just to kind of get things going quickly. But then, we have the AI review the appraisal and give us within I don't know 10 seconds, give us a paragraph on any issues, valuation, comps, and things
Sure.
that are part of that appraisal and things that are not part of that appraisal. So that probably saved us an hour's worth of time or more. I don't know,
Hmm.
and then essentially helped us be more accurate. So that's just one example that where AI is super useful. I mean, there's a ton of others.
Yeah.
And then block and go ahead.
No, I was acknowledging that I have some ideas, but I'll ask you them after.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then blockchain, I mean, it's really just about the cost of capital, the speed of capital, right? And both are kind of closely related, right? Like the ability, like what we've built together with Centrifuge and our investors on chain, what we built, I think is really cool. I mean, there's a trust, right? There's a trust with a trustee that kind of oversees investor protection, because I think there's always a challenge with combining sort of the automation, blockchain, AI, whatever, like any technology, with the
Hmm.
traditional investing, and making sure investors are protected, right? Making sure that things are, going smoothly. So I think on that front, we have a trust, we have a trustee, a traditional trustee, that's licensed and everything else. They oversee the investor protections. They make sure that, the loans that are on the blockchain are actually, real mortgages, really recorded. So they actually check and kind of provide that investor protection, because unfortunately, technology, I think, especially when it comes to real estate and probably other things, is not 100% there. Real estate is just such a vast, space, and that's
Yep.
been around for so long, right? That people are really people and municipalities, counties. I mean, we're dealing with
Yes.
right? Like so many entities and so many touch points and third parties, insurance, like
Mm-hmm.
everything, right? So those folks are not necessarily all tech savvy, right? Like some of them are not. Most of them are probably not. So, you
Most are
know,
probably not. Yeah.
right, right. So like to really streamline, like I loved what back in this is like 2017 or 18, some early pioneers like Proppy is one of these companies, and there's others that we're trying to like basically, put the real estate transaction on chain, like the sale,
Right.
right? And like, it like, some have been done. I think some pilot transactions have been done, but it hasn't yet become the standard, right? Like, and I think
It's
it's
far off.
still a ways away, right? Like we're
Yeah.
right, right. Because at this point, I think not every county, not every town has even gone digital, right? We're talking about like a digital
Right.
recording, right? Like where you could e-sign. Like not everybody has that. So this is back when, what year was DocuSign, invented or adopted by a lot of folks in the sort of general
Yeah.
business sense, right? So real estate is just, I don't know, it's just such a beast, right? Like it's going to take another decade, but at some point, I'm hopeful that, the processes I described earlier, right? Like some of the stuff, like we have a trustee, right? Trustee oversees things. They do it manually, but that's great. It's an independent
Yep.
third party, right? But they do it manually. It's still, a time commitment, a little bit of a time commitment, though they're very efficient. There's a cost, everything else. So I think, sort of what we built is like the marriage of the traditional finance and then, the newer technology
Awesome.
innovation.
Yeah, there's a couple key things there, right? As usual, just to remind everyone, and 1989, I was like, oh, that's my birthday. So,
Oh man.
but as I think about seeing automation and things come on more and more and more, I've heard all the things of like, oh well, this is going to do more to take our jobs or this or that. Obviously, if the listeners here, it's like, no, it's just going to keep removing parts that are that can be automated, right? Or I mean, to continue to help with parts of people's jobs as well. So why do I even mention that? Because for things that the trustee, right, the overseer of the transaction have to do, well, it provides really less manual errors. Manual errors, big no, especially in tech. You don't want to fat figure things. You don't want to whatever things, right? Same kind of stuff. And then the tech piece, like you were talking about, of using some of the LLMs, using some of whatever to accelerate certain processes, it's going to be super helpful. And so I think we're pretty bought into, despite the amount of time it takes for it to go, we'll call it mainstream to governments, to whatever, for in processes, and in the private sector too. We're pretty bought into seeing the impact of tech with these transactions. So that makes a lot of sense. And I'm really glad that you started to talk about the marrying the traditional side to of these processes to the next generation, which is really what we're talking about. Next generation with real estate investing in there, and
Yeah.
serving the customer, but also serving the investor. Because that's a key point. If I'm a listener, it's like, okay, cool. Like, what else should I be considering? Is this something that I should even be testing out with, something like NewSilver as an example, or should I be investing to this fund? Is it safe? How do I know, right? And things such as that. So I'm glad you started to allude to that. So talk to me a little bit more about that. Like, what are maybe some of the misconceptions about maybe AR? Frequently asked questions that you might hear from investors about when you talk to them, or about your company and the fund itself.
Yeah, what do we hear? I mean, I think the typical questions are just really around like, what has the portfolio performance been? What is, what are we seeing like as the outlook, right? Like people are always worried about like what's like, what's happening next, right? Like nobody can tell the future,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, but everybody wants to try.
Yeah.
So I think like, I think sort of like what do we see on the horizon for the residential real estate market in which we play. I mean, I personally think I also can't tell the future. I'll preface with that, but I think that I think that we're still seeing a lot of mismatch in the market, right? Like there's less supply than demand for housing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the United States is definitely like the world's number one place where people want to come, move their family, build a family,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, work, right? And as part of that, sort of the American dream, the home ownership is still a very valid thing. And I believe people are still, this is like the best investment that somebody can make for themselves in the long term, right? Like you buy a house now, it's expensive, but it's always been expensive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I think if we go back, whatever, 50 years, right? Like obviously real estate was much less expensive then than it is now. But obviously we've also had like, percentage of
Sure.
inflation
Yep.
that has occurred, right? Money is not worth what it was back then. Everything has changed. So, real estate's always expensive. It is unfortunately, by historical standards now more expensive than historically it's been, compared to like what people earn on the average and things like that. However, I think that with that, right, we have other advantages now that we as folks living in this country specifically and elsewhere in the world possibly as well. Specifically, I'm talking about the ability to work from home, for example, or work in a hybrid
Mm-hmm.
environment, right, where we don't need to necessarily live in Manhattan anymore to work for a New York City based company and have to pay,
Yep.
$5,000
Yep.
rent. Right. So now we could live in a tertiary city that, you could possibly find affordable housing in and buy yourself a property, whether it's a condo, an apartment, a house, whatever. I think buying is always better, right? If you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and work for a company that's based, in
Sure.
Silicon Valley or New York City, it doesn't matter, right? Like, so we have that advantage. Now it's up to folks to take advantage of that opportunity, right? Because it does take some, somebody's like willingness and ability to execute this, right? Like if they're living in a certain place and now they see that they can't afford to live there anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
To move somewhere else is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. So, folks are, they've got to like decide, hey, this is where I can afford to live. Like, look at the map. I mean, people are moving to like Tennessee, people are moving to
Yes.
Florida, right? Like people are moving all over the place. Like I live in Massachusetts and I think I just read that Massachusetts, like for a family to live comfortably, it's like $300,000. It's the highest in the
Yeah.
country, which is absolutely crazy to me. And also, Massachusetts is losing, huge numbers of earners. Right, people are leaving the state in droves. Like it's never happened like this before. I think it's a great place to live and raise a family, but it is very, very expensive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially if you're younger and like you haven't yet like settled down, you
Yeah.
haven't bought a house, right? It is expensive. But again, I think there are opportunities, huge country, like you'll figure out like, hey, this is where I want to be, and then figure out how to get there. I think it's possible.
Yeah. Uh, some key things sort of popped in my head while you were talking about that. I think one of the things that, just to, bring the, tech and investing perspective here together is just really reinforcing the idea that being able to collect so much more data gives us so much more accuracy as well, provided we can crunch that properly. We have a model for that, right? And it's a rough model until it goes through that model log. We start to fine tune it. And, I think one of the other major benefits too is that for many of the, the operators that are coming to get the loans from, you and the team company is that, the loans end up being safer, right? At least as much as you can tell based on all of the market information, all the information provided, right? There's still the execution part.
Yeah. There's always the one variable, and it's
Human.
the
Yes.
human behind this whole thing, right? Like that we unfortunately can only underwrite to an extent, right?
Yeah.
Like I think the FICO score, for example, that's been around for a long, long time. And I was just doing some reading yesterday, actually on ChatGPT. I was talking to ChatGPT and trying to like dig into like the FICO score and like some of the data
Yeah.
behind it and some of the research that's been done. Like it's amazing. I mean, like just on that, like I probably saved like hours that I would have to Google, some of this
Yeah.
information. But it's amazing. Like it's amazing how how highly correlated FICO has been through the years to like what the default has been on like a traditional mortgage, other things, car loans, things like that. So like there are those tools are available, but they're still not perfect, right? Like somebody could have the best intentions, an 800 credit score,
Yeah.
and then something happens and everything
Yeah, I
changes. So.
agree. Although one I've been using a bunch is actually Gemini. It was barred by Google before, but it's been pretty good. Just I don't know if you've messed with it a lot, but
I have not actually tried. I have not tried it. I know that because I mean we use the Google Suite
hmm
for things, for their
yep,
workspace or
yep,
whatever it's called now. And I was waiting. I'm like, hey, when are they gonna build up their AI so that they could like put in a co-pilot type of
yep,
a system there that can do more, right? Because like Microsoft with their
right.
partnerships with OpenAI has been doing this for a while, and I think like honestly like AI is just in its
Yeah,
infancy right now, but for basic productivity stuff, my God, it's such a
yeah.
time saver. It's
Yeah, what,
unbelievable.
what I found is really cool too is you can get some of the plugins for Gemini too. I think you can plug into like YouTube and some other things that keep on making it extensible so that you can, do some prompting and pull in data from other places too. So it's not just what access does it
Nice.
have to its public data set, or if you're doing something private, which is great for an organization because you have security and that becomes your own IP as well. But if you use some of these others like Gemini as an example, pull that in. Of course, there's a bunch of different LLMs that are useful for different, types of processes. But in any case, I want to respect your time here. We got about 6 minutes left. I'd love to do some sort of rapid fire things here. Talk to me about what trends we should be paying attention to with or what things you're paying attention to in your space for AI and investing.
Yeah, like I mean, just AI in general, but like specifically, I've been thinking about like how AI could help with
Mm,
valuations of real estate, right? Like I've been really digging into that. I haven't yet found an answer, but I do think one will come sooner than later. So that's really like something I've been thinking about a lot.
Valuations, outstanding. You have anything in mind that you think, if it were to happen, would to accelerate the adoption of AI and blockchain for you?
I think on the blockchain stuff, like I think there's been a lot of like regulatory hurdles, right? There's always something that's in the way of adoption from a regulatory perspective, and I think it's kind of sad for me because I'm a big fan of the United States being like at the forefront of tech in general. Blockchain is
Yes.
technology, right? I think with blockchain, the negatives to blockchain and it has crypto on it, right? Like crypto is
Yeah.
money, right? And that kind of competes with the
Fiat.
traditional finance. And I think, there's values to both. And I think traditional finance is definitely starting to adopt. So I think like just a short answer to that would be I'd love to see, and I think on the AI front as well, I'd love to see the US take the lead and craft regulation around technology that exists, right? Like
hmm
you can't put the genie back in the
Yep.
box. Like, blockchain and crypto's there. Like if you regulate it out of the existence in the US, I mean, it's already moved. A lot of it, like startups have moved out to like
Yeah.
Asia and other places, right? Because, but why, right? Like
Regulation.
create a path, create the rails and make sure that people do it safely and
Yeah.
effectively and then within the regulatory framework, and people will do it, and us will continue to
And if that
prosper.
wasn't clear on, BlackRock and other things that are going on already, they're adopting things. But um,
Right.
so on that same side, I was going to say, how does that accelerate returns that the investor gets? And it's probably as regulations are cut back, more adoption occurs, more usage, it gets finer grained, it's more reliable, and so it just makes everything faster and probably more returns too. Is that about right?
I believe so. Yeah, I think if you make I think you really have to have the rails in place. I mean, for financial services, things have to be in place. Companies have to be confident in what they're doing and know what comes tomorrow, right? Like it's already hard enough. Like, we have, like I said, we talked about COVID. We talked about or we didn't talk about as much the interest rates,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like nobody knows what tomorrow
Yeah.
brings in the world of financial services overall. So I think having regulatory clarity should be like a given, right?
Yeah.
Like that will help us all build better businesses and help everyone be a better
Outstanding.
investor.
So, talk to me about this NewSilver, a mission to helping improve local communities by providing fast, convenient, and flexible capital to real estate investors. Why is this important to you, NewSilver?
Yeah, well, we think what we do, I mean, with us, helping really small builders improve their housing stock, right? So we're helping local communities in that way. We really like all of our clients, all of our customers are small businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're 1, 2, 3 person shops, folks that are doing this full time or part time, and by doing what they do, right? They are essentially taking old housing stock, improving it, and then helping a new family move into that community. So that's really at the end of it what we
Awesome.
do.
Yeah, and that's important for America in general. With so
Absolutely.
much tech, how do you stay focused? And keep your blinders on to or stay focused right here from all the other stuff that's going on.
I literally I have to put on blinders, I literally have to put on physical blinders so I'm not interrupted by anything that goes on to the side. But it is very hard. I mean, it is very hard. I try to use tools like AI is like my go-to.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to really test out tools to help me stay focused. It's also on the flip side, like too many tools can help you lose
Yeah.
focus, right? So it's a fine balance there. But for me, like lately, AI and AI related tools have been something that we recently I started using like an AI tool that helps with like meetings, right? Like it helps us put the agenda together, and then it essentially like gives us a recap of a meeting. So after having an hour conversation with like 3, 4, 5
Yeah.
people, right, we have a nice summary without like an assistant or someone
Yeah.
sitting there taking notes and probably missing 3/4 of the important stuff, right? So that has just like helped tremendously and like helping us like structure the next meeting,
Cool.
right? Like helping us do the right thing. So it's really about using the right tools, not too many but not too few, and like keeping on track.
So being clear about what your biggest problems are, surveying a couple of the available tools, picking some, running through it, testing it, and just okay, got it.
Exactly.
We covered a lot of stuff today. I would really want to thank you for being here. Tech investing, again, executive level conversation. Talk to our listeners where they can find you here before you leave.
Yeah, I think newsilver.com is our website. I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place if you want to hit me up personally.
Awesome. I'll make sure it's all in the show notes. Kirill, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you, sir.
Cool. Thank you, Steve.
Cheers. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Path to Passive. We love connecting with our listeners and those on the path to architecting their wealth and improving their lives. Feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to see in future episodes. Get in touch with us through email or Instagram. See you next week for a new episode.